Okay, Photojournalism 59 crew. Hey, you like the smell of that? I like it too. So this week is a little different in my food shoot because of the COVID. So it's going to be a little unusual, but I thought it'd be great because it's pretty much like what you guys are going to do at home. So what I have here is a collection of the frozen foods that are delivered to seniors by the Series Project in Sebastopol. So they have a huge kitchen and an enormous number of people that they help out and deliver these meals to. And so we're doing a story on these frozen meals. And so I had to de-thaw them, they gave me containers for them, but they're not, this is the salmon chowder that we're going to try to shoot here in just a second. A little goopy, I'm going to have to heat that up and make sure it looks good. The noodles for a beef stroganoff that's on the stove now, I'm probably not going to show you that shoot because it's going to look pretty bad. It's sort of just gooey gray in meatballs. And then I have some pickled onions, and the chef gave me some greens and some chives and parsley to put on top to add color. Normally I'm working with a chef and we're doing it either at the restaurant or at their home. And sometimes that's difficult because you don't know what the light is. With John Ash, we have this system. I wish I could show you John Ash, one of his shoots. But he has a back door with a piece of glass on it. And so I can move that glass and if I move the door, we figured out 11 in the morning is the best time for this, that I can move the door and it reflects the light back onto my food that I'm putting down on the ground at the base of that door. So I'm just standing up over it, which is a lot easier than getting a ladder. And honestly, I'm just not a very good food stylist. So mine are usually pretty simple and all about color and texture. So I try to play off the colors of the food that I'm going for. So in this case, I'm choosing all my own stuff from my own house. What I decided to do is the salmon is in sort of a grayish, it's a chowder, so it's kind of gray behind it. And then, so the salmon is sort of that pink red. So I'm going to go with pink red because he gave me these pickled onions that I think go with that. And then I decided that I want them to pop. If I put them in a white bowl, it wouldn't be very interesting. So I have a black piece of tile. And I went to a tile store and I said, hey, I'm a food photographer. Could I buy one of your samples of your tiles, the biggest one you got? And so I got a big towel, and they just usually give them to me. I hit up like 3 or 4 stores, and I got white ones and that. And as you know, I've created a bunch of my own backgrounds, and I'll show you those at the end of the video. Okay, in my house, I have a couple different really great windows. I have this giant bay, but it kind of disperses the light a lot, so you don't have as sharp as light. And unfortunately, we're on an overcast day, but I have to complete this assignment today. So since I'm shooting down on this food, I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to open my front door. What's great is if you have a door that's glass, so the glass can sometimes reflect back in. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to take this light stand, and I'm going to attach it here, and then I'm going to place it outside the door. So you guys see out here, there's daylight out here. I'm a little late in the day for this, but unfortunately, so normally I'd like to put my reflector here, and I clip it here, and it reflects back in as the light shoots this way. Since I'm later in the day, I'm going to have to bring it out here and put it as close as I can, and this will give me a little bit of reflection. You see how that works? So it's easier if it's closer. The bigger the light source, that's good too, or sometimes you just need a little one, but it reflects in just a tiny bit of cool light, a nice reflection. We're a little bit late in the day, but I got to do it now, so let's go to it. Okay, in this shoot we have one little problem. The chef from the Series Project didn't give me enough of his fermented onions to fill my massive black bowl, so I'm going to use just 2 colors in this shoot. So I want to use this bowl, but since we don't have enough onions, this is a trick that I use and There are tons of these online. As I said, I'm not really a food shooter, but what I'm going to do is sort of make this little platform here just a little bit smaller than the inside of my bowl. And then it looks a little tall, so I'm just going to push it down a little bit more. There we go. And then I'm going to put my onions on top. I should have probably just cut some more of my own onions to make them. But now we can spread them out, and again, we're going to fill it every corner. And if they don't quite fill every corner, if you see a little bit of the silver, you're going to be okay, because you know it's food shoot, it's photo. You can Photoshop a little bit in a food shoot, even if you're a photojournalist. So anyway, that's how I sort of make that dish come up to speed there, or come up to height, so that the light will hit it correctly. All right. So I can bring this in and style all the food down, or what I've done is I've gone ahead and styled it because it's on just a little tiny black tile. So I have this pattern here that's all just two colors. I'm playing off the salmon and the red onions, and then I have a red handled spoon here, and against the black bowls, the black tile, and actually a black handkerchief. So only two colors. Okay, you see, so it's in the direct light there, and so to finish it off, I just want to splash a color, so I'm going to put some chives. I'm just going to randomly toss chives, because in a soup like this, it's pretty boring. It's only, you see the salmon, I've made sure to bring the salmon right to the top of the dish, and then I'm going to sprinkle these chives around, maybe a little parsley, just to give it some color. And there we go. Now make sure my spoon is in a good position. And I'm pretty much in frame, aren't I? Basically, I have two choices for my lenses here. I have a 55 macro. A regular 50 will do. A 50 is good. And I try to use the longest lens I can to get in there. So luckily for me, the brand new 70-200s from Canon focus really close, and I can stand up and maybe be on my tippy toes a little bit and get this all in focus. So here's how I shoot it. Okay, I'm shooting it at, I'm trying to shoot at a pretty, at the smallest aperture I can while still hand holding this lens. So I'm going to feel comfortable, maybe about since I'm shooting at 70, about a 1/25th of a second. So as long as I keep it there, I should be good, and everything should be in focus. A little too dark, so I'm going to open it up a little bit. Good. And then to make sure, I actually take my 55 and I shoot it too, and I close down even more just to make sure I have enough the depth that I want. And the key is to be directly over the bowl. If you're off a little bit this way or this way, you feel as though the camera's going to be falling over. So you'll find that you can't even turn it upside down, that there's only one direction that it works correctly. And then I refocus a lot and I keep shooting. And now I'm going to just take some of the onion and I'm just going to toss it on the board. I'm going to take maybe some of the chive and toss it on just to add another layer of the image. I'm not very good at this part. There's professional stylists that really know their world here. If you get to something like Bon Appetit or those, the photographer actually has a food stylist and a prop stylist. So somebody for just the plates and the dishes and somebody for the food. I've only worked with a stylist once, and they got paid a lot more than I did for the shoot, actually. So we'll try that one. I like that one. I think it's going to be the winner. The little chives add a lot to it. Uh-oh, I gotta cross them. I gotta do something there. There we go. So I'm shooting a lot, you see, and what I find is just various changes in the photo is going to make a huge difference. That one of these is going to peek out from the rest of them and say, I'm the one that you need to pick. So you see, this is my view from above. And as you see, as I move back here, it looks like I'm falling over. And as I move forward, I'm falling the other direction. So I want to be directly above it there. And again, you may end up cropping or doing something like that. Okay, so I showed you guys how to use the floor and a door, which is my preferred method, so I don't have to stand on anything. But let's have a look. If you're going to use a window, say the light doesn't work in your doors, or they're covered, or they don't really have much light coming through them, then I'd use a window, right? So first I have this giant bay, and I'm just gonna, here's my vegetables that are here. Oh, actually these are flowers that are growing. But you see when you look down on this that it's pretty flat light, because this bay window gives me 3 sides instead of just one. So usually if I use this, I'm in the morning, I use it in the morning, and the light will hit directly where the flowers are, but then if I come out here, it'll bounce and hit indirectly. So I usually use like this little table if I'm going to use this giant window. Oops, there it is again. But it works great for all sorts of things. It's a great window for that 3/4 lighting or portraiture. It's great. Okay, looking around my house, I have this window too, but you notice that this window has, there's an overhang up there. So it doesn't get, the light's going to be pretty dim using this window and not very directional. So I'm going to avoid this window if I can. Okay, and now coming in here to the office, we have another window, and it's pretty good, but let's go look at, see what's happening at this time of the day. At this time of the day, as you see, the light's coming through, and it's harsh and direct right now. In another 2 hours, this light's going to be really nice, and then actually it's going to be coming in, it's going to hit this side of the window, because the sun is setting that way, and so later it's going to not hit the inside. But then if I also put that white kicker card on the outside, it's going, and I angle it back in, it's going to give me an extra little glow. But I have to wait a couple hours for this photo. So, you know, you see you don't want that direct light. Actually, I'm going to take that back. Sometimes you do want the direct light, and it can look really good with direct light. I prefer a softer light for food myself. Finally, in the big TV room here, you have a window that's got some directional light. It's a south-facing or north-facing window, so it'll never get direct light. The problem is it's pretty soft light once you get down here. So anytime I'm looking at my light source, what I do is I hold my hand flat, and that'll kind of give me an idea of what the light source is doing. I'll hold it up, you know, to the side, like if I'm checking the light here, oops, I got to open up a little bit. I'll just hold it to the side like a face so that I can see the shadows on my fingers and how they would fall. So I'm constantly just holding my hand up to look at light and see how it's going to fall. So in this case, if I look down here, it's not bad. It's fairly dark, so I'm not going to get a great depth of field unless I put it on a tripod. But this is the best choice of window at this time of day now. Okay, we saw how to use a door, and I like that better because, you know, I can stand up. It's easier for me to deal with the situation. But if all you have is a window, that happens a lot. Now, like a restaurant, if I'm shooting in a restaurant, then I can't block the door while I'm shooting. So usually I'm using a window in a restaurant and using either a chair or a stool. Usually I ask for a stool. But again, this is my best window. It's an indirect light source. I brought in a table. Now the table has to get you up to the height of the window. Again, you can't have this, if you go below the height of the window, if I showed you with my hand, you know, my hand demonstration earlier, if I dropped it lower, and maybe I'll reshoot it, we'd lose the light. So this is what you want a table set up. I'm just going to use this little blue piece, but you can just use a tablecloth or something like that in your photo if you can't figure out a fun surface. So of course, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to need to bring in a chair, and for some reason I like to work with it facing backwards because that way as I lean over the image, because remember I have to be over the middle of that bowl that's there. I just got a bowl of cereal here. I know I had one student who was saying, do I have to cook? Nah, shoot a bowl of cereal. Just make sure it has some texture in it if you want. But, you know, you get to choose what you want to shoot for the first part of it. But let's have a look. So I'm going to get up on a chair. Or actually, so what I'd have to do is get way up here. And because I'm up here, I can't use my 70mm lens. So I'm going to use a 55, my 55 here. So a 50mm lens is really good for a window like this. And then you just want to make sure that you have a very sturdy chair or a sturdy a little ladder, okay? Because you just don't put yourself in a dangerous situation. Make sure you're stable the whole time too. So anyway, I'm in the same kind of situation. The light's coming in and cascading over the bowl. I'll show you what it looks like in just a second. But I also have a little clamp here that I set up. And so sometimes I can just use my knees to hold the white kicker card if I'm going to use that against the table. Or in this case, I do have this this clamp, so I can bring it in. I'll move the chair out for a second. And with this, I can bring this up, and you can see the variation. So as I come up, it adds more and more light to the bowl. So I can decide, oh, I want just a little bit. So again, that's why I varied the size in that previous shoot at the door. But with this one, I can hide it down underneath the table. And when I like it, I just get my clamp to work right, and I clamp it into place. And so then that's going to give me my little kicker light. And let's have a look at what that light looks from above. When I first started, everybody was shooting from the side and they were tilting the camera, so the food always looked like it was falling off the plate. So styles change over time. So as a professional, you have to adapt to what's happening there. But again, this simple light source is going to get you a nice, clean, simple image pretty much every time. So just to reinforce the description in the assignment, the way I shoot this is I want the most depth of field for a down shot as I possibly can get. So that means I set the camera to its highest ISO where I feel the quality is still good enough for reproduction. So I usually keep it in the, I try to get 800 and maybe 1250, but I don't go above 1250 for food. So if that's my highest ISO, I simply set it to my camera shutter speed to the shutter speed that I know I can handhold. So in this case, if I use a 50mm lens, I'm pretty comfortable at 60th of a second or 80th of a second. So if I set my camera to 60th or 80th of a second, then all I do now is I dial down my f-stop. So hopefully I can get f8 or something like that, or even more. So I dial it down till it's the correct exposure. And let's say it's f8. You know, that's the most depth of field I can get without putting it on a tripod, which is really tough from shooting above, but people have setups for it who do only food photography. So they have a tripod that goes over the meal. Or the only other thing we can really do is kick up our ISO to get more depth of field, and we don't want to kick up our ISO higher than 1250 in this case. Okay, so there are dozens and dozens of different ways to shoot food, of course. You know, there's artificial light, and people do use this light from the side. There's lots of different ways of doing it. I'm just showing you one technique, and to me, this is the most simple way of doing it and the most elegant. The light is always beautiful coming from this window. And you can actually, if you back up, you can shoot from the side in the same position at more of a 45-degree angle. So especially like meat where there's some glow and there's highlights all over it, usually I get a little lower and I'm shooting maybe from a 45. In these images, I'm using a heavy reflector card in the front to fill in as much as I possibly can. But for now, let's just try this technique straight down because it is the style that's in right now. Pretty much every blog is using down. If you look at magazines, everybody's shooting down right now. And it makes life a lot easier to manipulate the items in the photo too, it turns out, than shooting from the side. Okay, just a little reinforcement on what it says in the assignment. But basically, what you want here is the most depth of field you can get for the down shot. You know, I want to see my little raisins in focus on the board. So in order to do that, I set my ISO to the highest it can go while still giving me good enough quality for reproduction. So in the newspaper, 800 or 1250 is a good figure for a ballpark for me that I'm shooting, and I'm trying to get 800 out of it. And then at that point, I determine what lens I'm using. So from above in this shot, I'm using a 50, a 55. So I feel comfortable hand holding that at 60th of a second. Now I do take multiple images. I think you saw at the door that I'm going to take dozens of images and I'm going to refocus a lot, because you'll find that even though you're shooting the same thing over and over again, there's this one image as you move across that's going to pop from the rest. So once you set the ISO and you determine your shutter speed, now all you have to do is get over the image and set the correct f-stop. And so it should be nicely saturated. Usually I go even a third or half stop under and bring it back with food. So in post, I make it a little bit brighter, but I want that texture and depth of color you get when you underexpose a little bit. So once I've determined the correct exposure, that's the maximum amount of depth of field that I'm going to get. The only way to change that depth of field would be to increase the ISO, and I don't want to do that. So that's how you set the camera, and have at it. I mentioned that at Bon Appetit or one of the big magazines that there'll be a prop stylist and a food stylist, and but most food shooters work with another food stylist, except for newspapers. Typically, bloggers would do their own styling too. I start with just a simple thing. So I shoot just the bowl first. I typically do this in stages, and then I add things. So the first thing I'm going to add are just the extra raisins off to the side, and they want to be kind of randomized. So you kind of just toss them and hope they land in an interesting spot. One's hiding behind a little bit. Ooh, as I move on the chair, I saw my tripod shake. There you go. That's not bad. And then I'd take a few shots with just raisins around the outside. Second, I can add my spoon. I can put it this side. I can throw it to the other side. Oh, would you stop focusing? That sound you hear. I'm going to turn it to, there you go. Turn it to manual focus now so that you don't hear the autofocus trying to do its thing. So then I'd shoot a few with the spoon in it too, and maybe the spoon at different angles, or maybe it's on top with a few in. Maybe I put a raisin in the, oops, I missed that completely. I put a raisin on top. Maybe that works out better. Next, again, what I've done is I've got a blue bowl here. It's a weird blue bowl I made in ceramics class at the junior college. But so I'm sticking with that same color scheme. So the two colors we have here basically are the blue of the bowl. I'm going to get off of the chair now. The blue of the bowl, and then the grain itself, the cereal itself, is kind of a yellowish color. So let's try to pick up on that. So I don't have any blue napkins, but I do have a yellow napkin. So maybe I'd try that, you know, with a spoon on it. Now these stylists can get these napkins absolutely perfect. I don't know how they do it. I'm terrible at it. But usually I just grab a point to it and then go there. And then I organize my spoon in different ways in the shot. You know, I could toss it up there, you know, like this. Again, you know, it's have a look between each frame and see what you like. But then when you get back to edit, you'll have tons of different variations on the theme, and you may decide that yellow is just too much, or gosh, if I had only like even, you know, drape the whole thing in yellow, you know, maybe that works. I'm not sure. It looks a little bright to me, but you guys decide. But you got to decide if you have. If you do these options. So quickly build up to the image that you like, and then you'll have the options along the way. Okay, and once again, let's just show you a little bit about how that kicker card works. So this is no kicker card, and then as you lift the reflector, that's the sound of it lifting. It can only lift as high as the tripod, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to shove it down faster. So here it is with a full fill, and then there it is without. So once again, this is what you're going to do. You're going to fill it and then not. So you need two images for this assignment. You need one that's your perfect image from above, and then you need one with that little fill card in it, okay? Part of the food shoot requires you to choose a particular subject, in this case, mushrooms, and just shoot a single object. So here's tomatoes. Cut them apart, see what they look like inside, all that's good. In this case, I needed to do a story on how to use edible flowers, and I just created the pattern that goes around the type. I'm showing you here a few I got off the web just for fun. You know, just have some fun with it. It doesn't have to be staid or it could be ridiculous, as in this case. Or you can just do it really simply, like this kiwi here. Just shoot it, you know, super tight, and you're okay. Also, you know, you can pick like eggs here or blueberries. You can add another element just to highlight the blueberries. You know, there are no strict rules here. Also, I'd like to talk about color. You know, just, you know, make sure you choose the right colors here. I'm playing off the reds and the greens of the sushi, and in this case, the purple of the dyed eggs or the beet eggs with the purple couch that's behind that. I found a purple couch in the place. In this case, you know, you're playing with the green background, and the flowers with the hummus that's beet flavored. Okay, you guys, let's move that out of the way. Okay, we're here in the living room studio, the living room food shoot studio. And first I want to talk to you a little bit about surfaces. And so those are the key to food shooting now because it's all down. So you're going to see what's behind them. So as you saw in my car, I have a bunch of different surfaces. And a lot of them are on just pieces of wood, and I've added some texture and then I've just painted them. You know, way too complicated for what you guys are doing, and I'm getting paid as a professional. But we can find other surfaces everywhere, and it really doesn't matter too much. You know, hopefully you find a cool one. But let me just show you some of mine and maybe some of the pictures that I took with them. This is one I made recently. It's just really simple white, and we used it for the meatballs tonight. That's what those look like. This is a red. I've only used it once or twice as sort of a background. It looks a little, I think I went a little overboard on the color here, but maybe this would work for like an individual piece of food. So if you're doing a story on just one item, like I'll show you later, asparagus or blueberries or something like that, okay? Next we have, I went to a reclaimed wood place in Petaluma and bought a $16 board and cut it down and made this one. It's just a redwood fence. But then on the back I painted it sort of white underlayment and then different shades of blue on the top. So let me show you a shot with the blue. Great. And then I use this one a lot because it's so simple. So here's a few shots with this one. Okay, I think I found this at a used store or something like that. It's just an auto pan liner, and it's for oil and everything. And a woman who works for the Press Democrat, sometimes as a writer, has one of these and has used them on the covers of many books that she's produced. So I went out quickly and found one of mine. This one's got a little schmutzy because it's been in the car a bit. But I used it for asparagus, so here's how I shot asparagus. So you do have part of your assignment is to shoot a single item of food, like, it could be onions, it could be kiwi, anything that excites you. So I did this asparagus, I found a little twine and tied it around them, and I painted this background specifically for that, so we could float type where it says, where in the dark blue, we could float type in it. Oh yeah, and on the back side, again, they're two-sided, they're made of wood. And this one I like a lot, it's textured. I don't know if you can see the texturing on it, but I'll show you a couple examples here. This one is an old Model T. The back door that flips up to sit in the back. But I find that using even the handles and the little pieces here make quite an interesting photo. So here are a couple examples of that. And then today you'll see that I'm using a black tile. And these are those tiles I was talking about that I sort of scammed out of the tile places. And they don't care. They have a bunch of these samples that are given to them, so they're free anyway. They get a little scuffed up when I put them in the back of the car, so I keep them in the garage now. But they're not big enough for a lot of stuff, but they're okay. They'll work. But also, if I just look, I got one more biggie back here. So here, this is one I use. Again, it's just a piece of cedar fencing. Whoa, nearly hit my glass table. It's bigger for different items. So I actually bought this and made this specifically for a squash shoot last winter. So here's that squash shoot. And finally, I just looked over there right now and I saw that I had sort of it's a piece of marble tabletop. It's a little complicated for food, but maybe it'd work. I think it'd work fine. And I could put this on the ground too. So look around your house, it could be anything. You see there, I've got an oil pan and an old Model T piece, so an old rusted piece. John Ash uses doors from Marrakesh. Here's that one. That one's super cool. And anything that looks sort of old and funky works.